The hard thing is that like you need experience to get the job and you need the job to get experience, right? So you're on this merry-go-round where like if a studio is putting together an action movie and they're looking for directors that have directed action movies before, the number of women and people of color that have directed theatrical action movies is actually very small. That's not the fault of like women directors and directors of color. They're not getting hired for those. So how do we interrupt that? It is possible to have a great idea as an assistant, a coordinator, a manager, a director, a VP, be able to share that idea with the company and for that idea to be something that the company pursues with the same level of commitment, vigor, and belief as if a C-suite person had presented it.
Welcome to La Artisteada with Kiara González Durán. Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of La Artisteada. I am Kiara González Durán, your host, and today I am super excited to talk all about the entertainment industry. We have an amazing guest. So let me get to introduce her now. She was born in Jamaica and raised in New York before moving to LA. Kamala Avila-Salmon is a founder and CEO of Cascas Productions, a film and TV company creating inclusive, impactful, and commercially successful content. She was also the head of inclusive content at Lionsgate, where she led strategies that doubled the number of underrepresented directors across the studio slate. There's more. She also has worked in music, film, TV, and streaming marketing, having helped creators from Janelle Monae to Jada Pinkett Smith, and is currently working on projects with talent like John Legend, Chrissy Teigen, Tracy Stevens, and more. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, Kiara.
I am super excited. So I would like to talk a little bit about how I met you.
Yes.
We met at the NALIP Women in Media Forum.
Yeah.
And I remember I was going to be doing interviews. And I was so excited to interview you because I read somewhere about your production company that you created the structure as a non-hierarchical structure. And I was like, that is pretty innovative, especially within the entertainment industry. So, briefly before we get to why did you decide to structure your company like that?
Yeah, so the statement that you read is actually like it is a big part of sort of how I wanted to structure it, but it also was sort of like more aspirational. So our company is just two people right now. It's me and one other exec. And I think that one of the biggest issues in Hollywood is this feeling and this idea that like the best ideas are only going to come from the people who are at the very top of the company. And for me, just practically speaking, having only two people, it makes no sense for me to assume that like I have a monopoly on good ideas. There's only two of us. We need 100% or 200% from both of us. But even as we scale, I really believe that the tendency to believe that you have to be a certain age or have a certain number of years of experience to have good ideas is completely false. It's one of the big things that I learned and saw when I worked in tech, actually, which at the time that I was working there, I would describe as a very non-hierarchical sort of structure. And that doesn't mean that there are not levels and layers. And it doesn't mean that there aren't like supervisors and people that are maybe a little bit more junior that have more or different things to learn. But it means that like it is possible to have a great idea as an assistant, a coordinator, a manager, a director, a VP, be able to share that idea with the company and for that idea to be something that the company pursues with the same level of commitment, vigor, and belief as if a C-suite person had presented it. Like ideas are not better or worse because of who they're coming from. They are ideas on their own merit. And I think a lot about, again, working in tech and working at a place like Google, where they were at the time really proud of the fact that Gmail was not something they were going to build. It was the idea of a pretty lower level engineer that was working on it in his like spare 10% time, which is basically time that they allowed employees to work on things that had nothing to do with their jobs. And this person proposed what has now become like the biggest email platform globally. And so that idea wasn't good because he was a certain level. It was good because it was a good idea.
I love that. I love that. And you know, knowing your history, you started as an assistant.
Yes.
Was this something that you envisioned from the beginning, or is this something that like right now you were like looking back,
Yeah.
this is what I would have liked?
So I think both. I feel like one of the biggest things you get from every role that you have is that in every job, you're learning what to do and what not to do, and both are valuable. So I had times when I was an assistant where I felt fully included. My boss cared about my ideas. My boss thought it was really helpful to have someone that was not them, meaning like someone that was of a different age, a different generation, a different race, sometimes a different gender, and how that can really complement and bring a different perspective to the work. And then, of course, like all assistants, there were times when maybe with the same bosses or maybe with different bosses, I didn't feel empowered. I didn't feel like I could speak up. And I always thought, like, man, I wish things could be different. And when I become a boss, I'm going to do things differently. And so I think the combination of really taking those lessons with me really informed how I wanted to operate as a manager and eventually like as, the founder of a company. I thought a lot about sort of what were the ways in which I felt like as an assistant or just going up the ladder, I was valued, and how can I build that into my company? And what were the ways where I didn't feel valued? And I really felt like we should do things differently if we have the chance to do them differently. Like I remember being an assistant in the music business, and I walked into my first staff meeting and I sat, like, when I walk into a classroom, I sit in the front because I feel like I have something to say and I want to hear what the professor and teacher has to say. A lot of people love the back row, no shade, but for me, that's just very much a lean back posture, and I'm much more of a lean forward posture. So when I went to my first staff meeting, I sat at the conference room table like I thought you were supposed to. And I remember a boss afterwards was like, just so you know, like assistants don't sit at the table, they sit at the outer ring, like not at the table. And I thought that was so strange. But, I was like, okay, great, good to know the culture. But I also definitely had a moment of being like, that's so dumb. We should reward people who are eager to be at the meeting, who are there not just on time and early and actually want to speak. And so, from I was an assistant, I always had the mentality of sit at the table, be a part of the conversation, you know, contribute your opinion, be in the room, not just sort of like a vague sort of spirit occupying it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that because I think that that's true. And as someone that also worked at like started working as an assistant, I was eager to share everything. Like I
Yeah.
met someone and I told my boss I like was doing research for people that I
Yeah.
was very passionate about. But I do feel like other people sometimes were not super happy with that. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like how do you navigate these things in a place where you're going to continue working until you don't know when?
Exactly. I do think that, and that's why I said, like, even when I got that feedback, there was a part of me that's like, you know what? It's good for me to know what the culture is here
Mm.
because you can't operate the same way in every space. However, I think you have to be yourself.
Mhm.
I think you have to really be honest and authentic to who you are. And so the way that I navigated that and what I kind of say to assistants now is that you always want to understand what the rules, spoken and unspoken, are of a place that you're in. That doesn't mean you're going to follow all of the rules, but you need to know what they are. And I think sometimes the only way you can learn that is just sort of like step in boldly, be authentic, and you'll get signals, both unspoken and spoken, about sort of like how the system is responding to how you're showing up. And then you get to decide what are the things I want to tailor a little bit versus like, this is just me, take it or leave it. I'm either going to be successful here or I'm not going to be successful here. And I think that sometimes the other thing that people underestimate is that personality is one piece of it, right? And you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Like I always joke, like I'm not Beyonce. Everybody doesn't love me. Even though like there are people that don't like Beyonce, which I think is insane. And I look at the camera to say, I think that's insane. However, like nobody is everyone's cup of tea. And I don't think you should twist yourself into a pretzel, especially personality wise, trying to be someone that you're not. If you're naturally gregarious, like, does it make sense to try to be more reserved? If you're naturally, more outspoken, like not going to make sense for you to be more sort of shy. But I do think being flexible with your style is really important. learning to read the room and thinking about where am I going to bring this aspect of my personality? Where am I going to bring that aspect of my personality? And then remembering that, like, at the end of the day, for good bosses and good companies, performance is what really counts. There's a lot of different ways to be a strong performer, right? And people with two completely opposite personalities can be strong performers in the same company in different ways, and they can both be really liked and respected for it. Like, I think sometimes the issue can be if you are all like outgoing and personality and performance and like taking up space, which I am, sometimes those personalities are not always equally paired with like, but I can put my head down and I can deliver the work. And when you give me something, it's going to be delivered with excellence. And that's where I feel like sometimes it gets sort of ill received. If you are a dope performer and you're just a big personality, great. You're not necessarily going to be every executive's cup of tea, but you're going to find those executives that are like, I love that I can not only depend on you to deliver an assignment on time and with excellence, but also if I ask you what you think, you're really going to tell me what you think. You're not going to hem and haw. You're not going to be too nervous to say it. You're not going to be thinking about what level I am. You're just going to tell me honestly, I liked that album. I didn't like that album. I liked that movie. I didn't like that movie. And yes, you're always here to learn, but you're always going to bring your true opinion. I do think that's valuable.
And how do you think your approach changed
Yeah.
between you being an assistant right after undergrad and versus you being an assistant after going to do your MBA?
Yes.
And sorry. And also going the fact that you had already been promoted that first time before going into your MBA and then kind of like going back down, quote unquote, to becoming an assistant.
Yeah, so it was definitely a really interesting and kind of humble path to walk. So, yes, when I started in the music business, I had been an assistant and I'd been promoted a couple of times. When I left, I was like basically like a junior executive. I was leading kind of my own marketing campaigns. I had a boss who was incredibly generous in terms of like his desire for me to like really lead the artists that I was working on. So like one of the first artists I was working with was Janelle Monae, and helping to kind of craft like the marketing campaign around her EP. Such an artist, like an artist with such a specific vision, and also working on a bunch of other projects and really getting a chance to sort of like be in a leadership position, right? And then when I decided to go to business school and I decided to make the transition to film and TV, while there were a lot of things that were transferable, there were also a lot of things that I didn't know. And I really thought about, when I left business school, there was this question before me of like, am I going to take one of the jobs that seems typical for an MBA who wants to work in entertainment? They're going to be more sort of siloed and relegated to the business side. They're going to be like finance or business development or strategy or operations. And like I knew that I wanted to be closer to the creative. I wanted to be closer to the content. And for better or worse, and we can argue whether or not we think it's 100% true, but for better or worse, the creative side still does operate more as an apprenticeship. They really believe that everyone needs to start as an assistant, right? No matter how much information you're coming in with. And so you hear the kind of legendary tales of like lawyers that start in the assistant like position or in the mailroom at a talent agency because they're like, yeah, I passed the bar, but apparently I don't know enough to be an executive yet and I need to start over, right? And so I think knowing where I wanted to get to, I was able to focus on sort of like, doesn't matter what the title of this role is. What matters is getting in the door and learning everything that I can so that I can demonstrate to people that I do have transferable skills, that I do have knowledge and understanding and expertise that would be helpful. And so when I was an assistant after business school versus when I was an assistant after college, it was just like I brought a different set of skills and tools to that position. I still needed to do some of the basic, like all the basic things that assistants need to do, whether that is answering phones, managing calendars, doing expenses, being, listening in on calls and not being able to contribute the way that you might want to. So I still had to do that. And yes, was it harder to do after business school? Absolutely, because I felt like well, I have a lot of executive like understanding, and I also like have a whole MBA, and like I understand
And
things
we
about
have to
business.
mention, I do have to say, you have a whole MBA from Harvard Business School.
Yes.
Continue. I just
Thank
needed
you.
to like, throw that in there.
But you know what's so funny? It's like it was one of those things where there were times where that was a huge asset, and people were excited about the fact that I was an MBA. They were excited about the fact that I had a Harvard degree. They were excited about what that might be able to offer to them, even as I was an assistant, right? They were hoping that like that meant I would read scripts in a different way. That meant that I could show up in meetings in a different way. That when I expressed my opinion, it was informed not just by, you know, a couple of years of college, but also like a few years of working and being an executive and having this MBA. And there were other people who were completely intimidated and off put by it. Like there were places where I almost felt like I'm never someone to hide. I don't know how to. It's against my religion, but I definitely knew when I was in the rooms and in the spaces where they wanted me to hide the MBA, they wanted me to hide like the Harvard piece of it. And like you just kind of, again, it goes back to reading the room and knowing that you can find your people in any space. For me, the people that were going to be my people, by which I mean people that would be not only great bosses, but also great future mentors, great future sponsors, people that cared about my career growth. Certainly didn't think I knew everything because I went to Harvard or because I had an MBA, but they definitely thought I knew something. And they definitely thought it was important and helpful to their business to mine some of the information that I had. And they were incredibly proud and encouraged me to be, you know, have a lot of pride in my accomplishments while still knowing that like I have a lot to learn in all these different new areas, whether that's TV, film, or tech. And there were other people who were clearly intimidated or unnerved or off put. And you show up, you know how to kind of navigate around those people. But I always had a strong belief that like no matter how much I contort myself, those people are never going to be my people. They're never going to be the ones that bring my name up in rooms that I'm not in. They're never going to be the ones advocating for my promotion. So I can do everything I can to try to fit into the box that they want me to be in, and it's still not going to be enough. So all I can do for those people is just like, I know what I can control, which is the quality of the work that I do, my ability to be reliable and responsible, my ability to come up with fresh ideas, to be able to pitch and convey them, my ability to communicate. That's what I can offer to everyone, whether you are a fan or not. And then for the people who are like genuine fans, friends, supporters, cheerleaders, I can bring them even more. And like, you know, we can build on that.
And I'm wondering because I feel like a lot of assistants could relate to what you're saying, like, oh, I check off all of these things, like I share my ideas, or sometimes I don't, or I deliver on the work. And as a former assistant myself, I was an assistant with an assistant title for 1 year and then for 2.5 years. And I think that the sentiment across both of I was in different companies, was why in the world are we not getting promoted? And it's funny because for me, I was like, you know what, like I went in wanting to be an executive, and I went in like, yes, this is what I want to do. Like first in as an agent, or then as I moved on to development, and I was like, yes, I want to be a development executive because these are the people that hold the power, and I want to make a change.
Yeah.
But a little bit after a year, I was like, wait, let me take a step back because I'm not sure this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so thankfully the conversations with my bosses and everybody was very supportive. Like, yeah, explore. You have this as your job, deliver your job, but you can explore other things.
Yeah.
But then after the second year, it was like, no, like this is where I'm at. Let me go all in. And I started trying again. But I think that the sentiment across a lot of assistants was no one's getting promoted. And like I have friends who have been assistants for like 6 years, and they're like, I don't know what I'm not doing. And meanwhile, you have one or two people that are getting promoted, and it's never people of color. And so what do you think? And I was having this conversation with one of my best friends, and I was like, what are we not saying? Like, is it a conversation that we're not having? Obviously, I understand the systematic issue, right? Yeah. But in like the practical sense, what conversations are we not having when it comes to looking for a promotion,
Yeah.
given the current state of the entertainment industry, that you think we like more assistants should be having today? And obviously informed by your own experience, but then
Yeah.
also what you're seeing in today's landscape.
Such a good question. And quite a spicy and provocative one. So there's so many things rushing through my head right now because it is a multi-layered problem. And so there's some pragmatic issues. Some of the more pragmatic things that I think, are just harder to navigate around is that there are fewer and fewer positions, period, right? And as a result of that, people are staying at their levels for longer and longer because there isn't that room for them to grow upward, right? So if you just imagine a ladder where, like, let's say there are 5 assistants, and 10 years ago, there used to be 5 managers, and above them, there were 5 directors, and above them, there were 5 or like maybe more VPs, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, it starts to narrow a little bit, but it's not stark at the beginning, right? I think more and more now, what you're seeing is like you might have, like, for a while, you had the discomfort of like there would be 5 assistants and there would be 3 executives above them, right? And maybe those assistants were sort of sharing work, like executives maybe had like an assistant and then a junior exec, like all working with them. But like if there's like basically you're saying like it's like musical chairs, right? And so it's like if you're in a room with 5 people and 5 seats, and in the room next door, there's 5 people and 3 seats, when the music stops, only 3 of them can sit, right? And if the 3 people that are sitting there don't get up when the music starts again, which is supposed to create movement, meaning they're not getting promoted to the 2 seats above them, they're staying for longer at that level. Where are you promoting people to? Right? Mm-hmm. And so some of it is that there are some hard caps around the number of spaces that are available. And as the business gets more constricted, you end up with fewer and fewer seats at every rung. Now, I would say entertainment is not necessarily an industry that is unique to that dynamic, but there are other industries that have a much clearer up or out policy, right? And so you might hear of that at some consulting companies or at some banks. A lot of like MBAs talk about this, right? Like people that I went to school with, where like there might be 100 analysts that join that class, but everybody knows that there's 60 seats at the next row. And so if you're one of the 40 that's not identified for one of those 60 seats, they're not just going to keep you at the analyst level for another 2 years. They're going to say, hey, not going to work out for you here, right? Like up or out, because they need to fill your 100 seats with the next 100 people, right? And so that can feel very brutal. It doesn't happen that much in entertainment, and sometimes I almost think it should, because I feel like communicating to people whether or not they have a path at a company can save them a lot of time. Because I also know people who have been assistants for what I would consider way too long, partly because whatever it is their boss or their boss's boss is not seeing in them is not being communicated, not being addressed, not getting fixed. And so they're like, but they're great at the assistant level, so let's just like keep them there, right? And like if you're someone who wants to move up, you're like, that's actually not helpful to me. So that's a part of it, right? I think the other piece of it is that it just is also true that there are a lot of invisible biases and things that like just impact us as execs of color and assistants of color that are just different than our white peers. It doesn't mean that everyone isn't working hard. It might not even mean that like the white peer that's getting promoted is not talented and smart and whatever. You're just like, but I am also talented and smart and whatever. So why is it that when there's that one seat, it always feels like it's someone else and not us, right? And I think that that's true, and I will not gaslight anyone about that not being true because the data is very clear, right? I think sometimes when you're talking to more senior execs, they can sort of like mince words. Oh, that's not true. Like that, like no, it's just true.
Yeah, and right? I would like to add that I remember when I was an assistant in an agency, just like the conversations that go around and like how people interact and network, I always like to use this example about building trust
Yeah.
in these spaces, because I remember that two of my best friends were two white guys that worked very hard.
Yeah.
But I remember that they would like, one of them told me like, hey, yeah, like I think I asked them, what are you doing this weekend? And they were like, oh, we're like some assistants and us, we're going to this concert. And I am also
Yeah.
someone to not shy
Yeah.
away from my questions. And I was like, why was I not invited?
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, because I think that you
Yeah.
like I don't even know how
Mhm.
to pronounce it, country music.
Yeah.
And I was like, why did you think that?
Right.
But I think that that is such a perfect example of how
Absolutely.
taking like these conversations, and obviously everybody that was going was white
Yeah.
in these spaces. But I think that I hope that that kind of like raised the question, like,
And made him go, like, why did I make that assumption? So what you said is so true. And where I thought you were going was actually like, some of us are actually going to go hang out with, like, if not the boss, but like the person in between them and the boss, right?
Mhm.
Because sometimes, like, senior execs and junior execs, like, well, might often build outside of office relationships with people, right?
Mhm.
That we don't have equal opportunity access to, right? They might assume, oh, I'm into this band and this person might be into the band too. And then before you know it, that like director or VP has an outside of office like friendship with that coordinator or assistant, and they're not trying to be biased towards them. Maybe they just did genuinely think, oh, I think this person would like this artist, or I heard them talking about this artist and I'm going to see them. That's all well and good, but then as it compounds into access, then when they're in the room and they have the ability to recommend someone for a promotion, they may know you both, but they know that other person a little bit better. They know some of their, like, they've learned other things about them outside of that room, where like you may not have had the chance to demonstrate that. And I do find that that's really, that does show up. And so it's never going to be sort of like people are gathering in a room and deciding like, I don't like people of color and I don't want to promote any of them, right? There are some of those people, but if that's what we were up against, like, I think it would be a lot easier to address. It's more the insidious ways that inequities creep in.
Yeah.
People build relationships with people that are like them, right? People build relationships with people that they have things in common with. Then all of a sudden they know them in a different way. Then all of a sudden when push comes to shove and they have to say like, shoot, we only have 2 spots and we have 4 people. Like my guy Brent, my girl Jessica, like let's go with that. Like more of a trusted known as opposed to Kiara's a really hard worker, but like I just don't really know her like that. Right. And so I do think that those things absolutely come into play. Like you'll also see the value of people like building relationships with like not just their boss, but their boss's boss. And so when I think you are an assistant or a more junior exec of color, we have to work a little bit harder to try to find those commonalities. We have to work a little bit harder to like be the person that feels comfortable popping into the SVP's office to chat a little bit. And that's why sometimes we're like so excited when an exec of color at a senior level starts, right? When I was hired at Lionsgate as an SVP, like so many of the assistants and coordinators of color all wanted to like get to know me. And I totally get why, because when I was an assistant, like I'm looking at all the SVPs too, and I'm trying to figure out who can I build a relationship with. And if there's only one exec of color, I'm going to take my shot there. Didn't mean that I didn't try to build relationships with senior white execs too. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But it just sort of like all of those things I think compound as to why you see that friction when it comes to sort of like, why are we not getting promoted? But the last thing I'll say very quickly is that I do think that there is a delicate balance to be struck between sort of advocating for yourself and asking for a promotion. Right now, like sitting now in the more senior level and having people come to me at different points in my career being like, I'm ready to get promoted. Like you do, I think as a manager sometimes have a slight like recoil, not because it's bad to like advocate for yourself, but because one, you may not be able to give them that promotion right in the moment. So you feel a little kind of flat footed, like, oh, I can't give you the thing that you're asking for right now. But also because you're a little bit like, are you thinking about the title that you want, or are you thinking about the work that you want to deliver? right? Because sometimes people are like, well, I've been at this level for 2 years and therefore I need to go to the next level. And what I took from my time in tech, where one of the things I thought was good is the way that they would explain the different levels, right? So to go from a level 3 to a level 4 is not a tenure thing. It is a like work product thing, right? So to get from a 3 to a 4, level 3s like maybe facilitate or collaborate, etc., like things that are more sort of like support functions. Level 4s create, initiate, like originate, etc. So show me where you are creating, originating, ideating. Don't just show me that I've been in this seat for so long and when I get to the next seat I'm going to do all these other things, right? You have to find ways to demonstrate that you're already working at that next level that you're advocating for, and what you want to do is partner with your boss on, so is there anything else I need to do to show that? And or do you feel like there's room? Because there's the true question again of like how many seats, how many director seats are there in the room? If there's only 3 seats and they have 3 great directors and none of them are getting promoted, are you saying like consider me instead of one of those and like kick that person out? You're not going to say it that way.
Yeah.
But sort of like, what is your vision for? And like they will have a better understanding of where there are seats, where there is movement, where they can advocate, but be thinking about sort of like my understanding of what the next level requires is this. And this is how I'm trying to bring that thinking and approach to my current level. Because even as an assistant, there's ways to be an assistant at an assistant level, and there's ways to bring a VP level of thinking, insight, strategy, delivery to like assistant tasks, right? It's one thing to say, I'll just use schedule really quickly. As an assistant, you're doing your boss's schedule, right? You're figuring out, okay, this person wants to meet with them, this other person wants to meet with them. Where does it go in the day? Right? I would say level 1 is like being like, well, they have a free moment at this time. Let me put it in. Right? Level 2 is like, wonder what conversations they need to have before that meeting. Are those meetings already scheduled? Like, I wonder what conversations they need to have after that meeting. Like, am I anticipating what my boss is going to need? I'd say level 3 is like even above that, where I'm like, I'm looking at the whole month. I'm not just looking at the schedule. I'm looking at like, what is my boss trying to accomplish this month? And how do these meetings actually help them accomplish that? Do they need to be tied up in like 3 hours of meetings today, or do they actually need to like sell this show? So actually what I need to do is like figure out who I can push to next month, because I need to protect 3 hours of work time for them. And I've had assistants that have been able to do that. And I've had assistants who are just like, you're free at 10, so I booked it. And I used to be one of those assistants, because that's how you all start, right? Level 1 is just like, where does it fit, right? Level 2 is like, what is it for? Level 3 is like, what is the bigger picture that's being accomplished? Maybe in part by meetings, maybe not by things that are not meetings. And so you can show up with a VP level of ownership and strategy, even as an assistant. And I think that that can be sort of how you start to differentiate yourself.
I'm like, maybe I wasn't that good of an assistant.
No.
Like, if there was so much strategy behind scheduling these meetings, then maybe that's why I had to quit that job.
And honestly, I also do think that like that's why there are people that are career assistants, right? And they get paid a lot of money to do that, right? Maybe it isn't their desire to be an exec, but if you know that like at the end of the day, I'm only trying to get but so good at scheduling because like that's not really my goal, that's okay. But know that like how you approach every task is an opportunity for you to demonstrate to your boss executive level thinking. No task is too small to like demonstrate that.
Yeah, I think what was really hard for me, at least within this space, was that I was just so passionate about people, about flagging people, about pitching things, what was new, what was happening. That I think that a lot of my and I think that this was because I personally am a very people's person. Like, how can we advance these things? And so I would like to also talk about your experience as a head of inclusive content. This is a couple of jobs. But you doubling the slate for underrepresented directors. Like, what do you think? Because I think that a lot of the conversations that are happening now, it's like there's not enough people that are experienced, or even the people that do have that experience have a very hard time like crossing through the gatekeepers.
That's right.
And so what do you think was your strategy to build that? And then also, what is something that you noticed from filmmakers, for filmmakers listening to this conversation, that you're like, oh, I just wish they had this experience for me to be able to advocate for them in these rooms?
So I think on the first part, one of the things that I did when I joined Lionsgate was just do inventory and gather data, right? Not just on like the industry, but on Lionsgate specifically. And I think if you're trying to talk to an executive or a company about changing the trajectory of like underrepresented directors, you need to come with receipts, right? You need to come with like, not just like, I have a feeling, or I'm hearing from friends that like underrepresented directors are not getting hired. It's like you need to be able to say at this company over the last 10 years, less than 10% of our directors have been either women, people of color, etc. Is that because, and then you need to have like hypotheses that go beyond like blame and or racism, and understanding why do we think that's the case, inviting them to sort of like, now we all see the data and we understand that like there's a gap. And everybody's saying that's not what we want, right? We don't believe that only white men can direct, but somehow the slate is mostly coming out like that. Then let's have a brainstorm about like, what is it, right? Is it that women and people of color are not getting on the director consideration list? That's one issue. And if that was the issue, like, how would we solve that? Is it because movies are mostly coming in packaged? Movies already have directors when they come to us. So we're just saying yes to the movie and it's already got a director, right? Is it that? And if that's the case, like, do we need to have conversations with like agencies and managers about the packages that are coming to us? Or is it the genres that we're working on and like, oh, where our company is really focused on action and horror? And is it true that there's not as many women or people of color? I'm like, I'm open to all the explanations. I'm not starting with like, you just don't like women or you just don't like people of color. I really wanted to understand like why, right? Because it's not a uniquely like individual studio. It's replicated at every studio. So cheat code is that like, even when you wade through all of that and you factor in budget of the movie, right? And you factor in genre and you factor in like packages, all of those things, like none of them explain why it's still 90% like white men, right? But like we need to put all those on the table so everyone can feel like they said the thing that they think it is, right? Then once we've sort of like taken those on, what can we do to change it, right? Is it that we need to be meeting with more like women and BIPOC directors even before they're connected to a particular project, right? Maybe once a project comes in, studios are much later in the pipeline. They are mostly reacting to packages. They're not usually saying yes to like naked or spec scripts, right, that have no directors. So, but they can still be doing generals and setting meetings. So I would encourage our senior execs to like set meetings with female directors, find out what they're working on. Set meetings with directors of color, find out what they're working on. Maybe it's not something that's already coming to you because maybe their rep or themselves have decided, oh, it's not for Lionsgate, it's not for A24, it's not for whomever. But maybe if you meet with them, you might be like, no, I want to hear that pitch. I want to read that script. Like that's one way you can maybe interrupt some of the momentum. I think the other thing we did too was just
And with that, did you set targets for the amount of people that they should be meeting with, or was it more of a general pay attention to how diverse your meetings are? Like, what was that
so
specific
the level of granularity. So I think that like when it came to the slate, we set some specific like targets and benchmarks that we wanted to hit. And it was never sort of like these particular movies need to be directed by this type of person. But it was like, we're making a slate of 15 movies and we have a development pipeline of 30 movies. Me and my team, we look at what the current director representation is, and we talk about where we want to get to based on the high water mark across other industries or across other studios. We should at least be able to do as well as some of our peers. What are we doing what are we not doing that they're doing? How can we aspire to that level, right? But I didn't get to the level of granularity of like, you exec X need to be meeting with like this percent of like, this had this number of generals. But I would meet people and I would recommend, hey, can you join me in my general? Or hey, can I like recommend you do a general with this person and I'd love to join you. And like I would constantly be like, me and my team, we'd be like looking at the list of directors and like always have to say, there's not that many women on it. There's not that many people of color on it. What about this person? What about that person? The hard thing is that like you need experience to get the job and you need the job to get experience, right? So you're on this merry-go-round where like if a studio is putting together an action movie and they're looking for directors that have directed action movies before, the number of women and people of color that have directed theatrical action movies is actually very small. That's not the fault of like women directors and directors of color. They're not getting hired for those. So how do we interrupt that? And even as a producer now, where you think like everyone thinks like it's someone else's problem to solve because it's happening way before I get involved, right? So a producer is further upstream than a studio, right? And so there are ways in which I love that and I feel like I can do it. I can be the change. I can be putting the packages together that are going to studios. And we absolutely do that. We absolutely try to do that. But there also, I run into that conversation even with our writers, even with our other producers about we're trying to get this movie to sell to these studios, right? This is the list of directors that they're going to be comfortable with. Once we go outside of that list, now we're in a fight, right? Now, the thing is that things that matter are hard. And sometimes I sign up for the fight, right? But other times I'm like, all right, we have to balance between sort of like wanting to move this project forward and wanting to do some gate opening, which is what I call like creating opportunities for people who may not already be on the short list, right? Things that I know are true, I can't gate open for everyone all at once, right? Like, so I can't gate open for a new writer and a new director while being a brand new producer myself and be like, and I want the lead actor to be like someone you've never heard of, but they're really great, right? That project is going nowhere. And so we can all like get excited and say like, we're doing it, we're fighting the fight, but like that project's not going to sell, right? But like maybe I can fight for a director if I can somehow either through their relationships or my relationships get a really like A-list actor or a minus list actor to say yes, right? Maybe that actor putting some credibility on this director will help us to move it forward, right? We need one or the other, right? Or I can't get a $50 million movie or even a $20 million movie for this early stage director, but maybe we can fight for the $3 million movie. And still we're gonna need like powerhouse producers. Like I'm very like humble and aware that like I am not yet Shonda Rhimes, Ryan Murphy, etc. I had a friend who said to me that sometimes the only seat at the table that you can add is your own. And that is valuable, right? Sometimes I'm gate opening for myself, right? And I'm the person that needs the sponsorship. When we have great scripts, like I could be super territorial and be like, this is just for us. I'm the only producer on it because I found it and like it's my, like I deserve the credit for this. But like if I know it's a bigger movie than I can sell on my own, it is much more honest and much more strategic to say to the writer, I'm so happy that you want to go with me and like I'm going to fight for this movie. And one of the ways I'm going to fight for it is I'm going to go see if I can get a bigger producer than myself to come along with us. Right? Now that means that like on every decision, I'm collaborating, right? Maybe I would have gone left, but this bigger producer like says, I think we should go right, right? I have to figure out the happy marriage of keeping everybody together.
Yeah.
And like maybe the writer might be like, when it was just you and I, it was super scrappy, we could do what we want. And it's like, that's true, but like we can't always mistake like motion for progress, right? Maybe we weren't actually getting closer, we were just spinning our wheels, right? What concessions might we need to make to this other producer so that they feel enough ownership that they want to put it on their slate, they want to put it on their back, they want to use their credibility? Because once we get in and we make the good thing, then all of a sudden I have more juice in the system that I can use on other projects. You have more juice in the system that you can use on other projects. That director has more juice. But like if it doesn't get made, then we're all just still on the outside talking about how unfair it is that we can't get it made. And so I think that there is a balance of like boldness, audacity, and like pragmatism and strategy that you have to bring to all of these conversations, including how do we diversify the ranks of directors? How do we get more of our stories told? And the answer sometimes is not like they just need to do it anyway because it's the right thing to do.
Mhm.
It's like we just have to figure out how to get. I'm like, no, we have to figure out how to get them to want to do it and how to get them to think it was their idea to do it by figuring out like what are all the things we need to sort of maneuver to make them feel comfortable enough for us to take this risk. And I use these air quotes because I know we don't see our stories as risks. We don't see this as a wild swing. We know that we're very qualified. We know that like we would have just as many credits as anyone else if we were given the green light more often. But like we're arguing hypotheticals at a certain point, and it's just like let's just get into the arena and let's just try to do the work.
And now that you're a producer, and like the founder and CEO of Cascas Productions, what is something that you believe more producers and filmmakers should be doing from this end to try to pitch to studios or maybe more independent studios, but
Yeah.
how do they sell projects? Because I also think that a conversation that often happens with between I guess like versus filmmakers versus studios or people that are financing things. It's like filmmakers, my work is art.
Yes.
Which I believe it is, but this is kind of like the only way to perceive a project. But many people on this other side perceive the art as a sellable product that they need to sell to someone, whether that is to a buyer, to a studio buyer, or to the audiences.
Yeah.
So how can a filmmaker navigate that conversation and producers, I'm sorry, when they are trying to pitch to someone or finance their work?
Yeah. So I had a former leader who was the head of a studio say to me that like when a director or producer comes to me pitching their movie, I usually at some point say to them, like, if you were in my seat and it was your money, would you spend it? Not if it, and assume it's not your movie anymore. Somebody has brought you that movie. Would you spend your own money on it? And I think that like it would be really smart for more creatives to put that question back to themselves. Not because your work is not art, but like it's show business, not show art, not show philanthropy. You know, the fact that you are sitting in front of whoever you're sitting in front of, whether that is a producer that you want to put it on their slate and help you get it made, whether that's an independent financier that you're asking for money to make your thing, there's the reason why you want to make it. And that reason is powerful. And if that reason is not in the pitch, like it's not going to sell, right? You need that passion. But I think what's the reason that they want to make it, right? Take off like your hat and put on the crassest hat of commercialism that you can think of, right? Why should they want to make it, right? Be really, really crystal clear on that for yourself. I also think thinking about who the audience for your work is, right? A lot of times because creatives are, they know what they want to make and what the story is and how many people they believe will resonate with it. A lot of times they're like, my audience is everyone. It's everyone that loves movies. It's everyone that loves a horror film. It's like that is usually a movie with no audience because very few things are for everyone. Like, are you making Toy Story? Like, otherwise, it's probably not for everyone, right? Knowing who it's actually definitely for, meaning who is going to be super passionate. They're not just going to watch the movie or the show. They're going to tell someone they watched it. They're going to advocate for it. They're going to be your cheerleader. And how big is that group really? Like, let's leave aside your mom, your dad, your friends, all the people that like care because it's your story. Who are the people that are going to care because they can feel like it's their story, like genuinely, right? And I think being able to articulate that to your producer and being able to articulate that to someone you want to be your financier and to someone who you want to buy your movie from a distributor perspective is really important. One, because sometimes they don't know who your audience is, and especially when it comes to things that are coming from underrepresented creators, they may well be thinking your audience is super tiny and specific. And if you're like, no, my audience is all these other people, because it's not just because I'm Black, my audience is Black, and those are the only people I can reach. And then maybe I can only reach Black women because I'm a Black woman. Like that may be how they're thinking about your story. And you want to take the opportunity to flip that but also because it shows them that like you've thought deeply about your story, not just from a creator perspective, but also from a consumer perspective. I think sometimes we use the commerce piece of the business as like a bad word, like something we have to hold our nose and kind of get through, something that like they're gonna make me make money from this. But like the reason why I'm making is because it's art. It's like, well, then you really need to make it on your own because like let's see if that art will just magically find its audience, right? If you want people to put their money into it, they need to know who they're supposed to be going after. They need to know how much they can make from it. And I also think the way that I think about it is like commerce is actually good for impact because if we are building audiences, then we can make impact. A movie that is brilliant and beautiful and has the most amazing message, but is only ever seen by one person or only ever read by the few people that can get their hands on the script, is not going to make a lot of impact in the world. Ideally, the reason why I want my movie at a studio or I want my show on a streamer is because I want it to be seen by thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. And I think it has value for thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, maybe even billions. Maybe I am working on the next Toy Story, right? If you are, definitely tell me if you're working on the next Toy Story. But I think being able to articulate that, like, this is who it's for, this is why they'll be reached by it, you know, with it. And if we do our jobs well, meaning I do my job well as a filmmaker and I make this thing that is so accessible to all these audiences, and you do your job well as the distributor to get it to all these people, we're going to make so much impact in the world, right? I think people don't like talking about the money as like not the dirty like word in the room, but actually like it is a part of how we make impact.
Yeah, and I think you just gave like a crash course on how to approach this conversation and how you envision your work. And I think that this can apply to film, but it also applies to any other type of art,
Your
right?
book, your painting, your podcast, right? Because I do think some art is private and some art is personal, and that's totally fine. And if you have an honest conversation with yourself about the thing you're working on, and you're like, it's not Toy Story. It's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be for a very specific audience. And I know who that audience is, and I know how to reach them. And like, I'm going to make it for a number that makes it a good financial investment for you, right? I'm not going to ask you for $30 million, or maybe I'm not even going to ask you for $5 million when I know that, like, I don't know that it's going to return that. I still think it deserves to be made. And like, I'm going to find a way to make it for one. Would you make it for one?
And I think it also applies to like maybe like up and coming filmmakers are trying to look for $10,000. Like, how do you sell it to the people around you to want to invest in your project so that your story also gets made? And we're running a little bit out of time, but I think my last question, I really wanted to also delve into the marketing aspect of it because you have a lot of knowledge and experience.
Yes.
But on a more inspiring note, like, well, I guess first, what are you most excited about in the near future of Cascas Productions?
Ooh. So what's so tough is that it's always hard to talk about your slate in detail because things are still unformed and forming. I was able to share a little bit of the slate maybe last month with a writer over at one of the industry's trades. And talked about sort of like some of the things we're building then. So I can talk about some of those. So we are working on a really cool project with John Legend and Mike Jackson's production company, Get Lifted, that I can't say too much about, but we have an amazing writer who comes from not only TV, but also the playwright side, who's funny and like just like such a bold, fresh voice that we believe can be hopefully a rom-com for the ages. So that's something I'm excited about. We're working on something else with another production company that is a provocative, satirical thriller with some really dope writers, and we're working on like finding that great director for it. And I believe that like this could be up there with like, it's not like a Get Out or One Battle After
Mhm.
Another or Sorry to Bother You, but it would be in the pantheon
Mhm.
of like those like iconic, like one for the ages. That would be really great to make. And so I'm excited about projects like that. I'm also excited about a couple of things on our TV slate. We are working on soapy thrillers about Black female con artists. We are working on like mystery grounded sci-fi series about like real life places in Southern California that are potentially haunted. We are working on like really cool coming of age new adult like dramedies with like all kinds of interesting like people from different backgrounds, and just continue to be committed to stories about women, people of color, LGBTQIA people, people with disabilities, and the idea that those identities are not their genres. Like Black is not genre. Like Black is not a genre. Latin is not a genre. We can tell stories about all these people,
Yeah.
and we can really believe that they are for big, big audiences, not just for us.
Yeah, I'm like, a perfect example, Bad Bunny is for the people.
Yes, he is.
Sinners was for me.
Yes,
I
he
love
is.
that movie.
Absolutely, right? I think that we all know that's true. Crazy Rich Asians was for me,
Yeah.
right? You know, it's like there's Jane the Virgin was for me. Gilmore Girls was for me. Like we
Yes.
can watch so many different types of people and
Mhm.
relate to so many different types of people, and
Yes.
those stories really stay with you. So I would say just be keeping a good thought, lighting a candle for some upcoming pitches that we have, and hopefully we'll be able to share more about like things that we are officially, concretely working on that hopefully we can get to screens soon.
Yes. Well, I'm excited to see your name now that I've been working in the entertainment industry. I love saying to the on the credits and being like, "Oh my gosh, I know that person." So I hope that I
From your
can
mouth to
have
God's ears.
that experience soon. And just this is officially the last question. What do you wish more creatives of color knew about being a creative in today's climate?
I think I would say the thing I wish more people knew was that it's okay to blend your realism and pessimism with also unbridled optimism and joy. I think that we can get so bogged down by all the things that are broken, and sometimes they become the reasons why you can't do, shouldn't do, won't be able to do. And I have been in meetings sometimes where I feel like that energy is brought to the room and it does sort of deflate the conversation. I wish people knew that like the only thing you can control is your passion for what you're making and the energy that you bring to the room. You're not always going to be able to control who says yes. You're not always even going to be able to control like what rooms you can get into. But if you get into the room, like make sure that you are leaving them like feeling better than they did when you first walked in. Like I was in a choir in college called Kumba, and one of the things that it means in addition to creativity is trying to leave a space better than you found it. And that's what I'm trying to do in the industry. There's so many like there's projects I want to make and green lights that I'm seeking and careers that I want to back and my own career that I'm trying to launch. But like ultimately, if the thing that I do is hopefully to leave Hollywood like a little bit better than it was before by challenging ideas, by bringing optimism, by being like, I love a crisis, never waste a good one, by being like, things that matter are hard, but we can do them, by hearing people maybe one day share, you know, what some of my prior like coworkers would call like Kamala isms, like, you know, things I say that apparently stick with them and then they share it with other people. Like, that's great too. You have the power to do that.
Oh, I love that, and I love this conversation. I think that I obviously we were talking earlier. I am super passionate about representation and building, I guess, like bridges between across cultures and across different people at different levels. And I think that this is something that thankfully I've had the honor to do throughout my couple of years in this industry. But it was very okay. This is a very weird word choice, but it felt very healthy to speak to you.
Yeah,
In
good.
terms of because I think a lot of people can be very discouraged right now because
Yeah.
of things that are
It's a
happening,
discouraging time in certain ways.
and it's tough. But knowing that you are there at the forefront, building spaces, and honestly, I think that as people of color, when you're building a space for yourself, you are automatically building a space for other people. you can build more or less or shift throughout your career. But I think it's very inspiring to hear all the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with us today.
Thanks for having me, Kira. What a great conversation.
Thank you, thank you. And thank you everybody for being here and listening to this powerful episode. If you know a filmmaker or somebody that works in the entertainment industry that just needs to either be inspired or learn how to promote and share their films, please send it to them. But thank you for being here on another episode of La Artisteada in partnership with Univision 34. See you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of La Artisteada, a media collective for global culture shapers. Make sure to subscribe and let us know how your art is impacting the world around you on our social media channels at la.artisteada. This episode could not be possible without the amazing team behind it, Erin Jimenez, Diego Lopez de Anda, and myself, Kiara. See you on the next episode.